Clara O'Rourke's rifle cracked through the dawn air, and the rustler tumbled from his saddle before he could draw. "That's my land you're stealing from, boys," she called out, her voice steady as iron. 3 more riders wheeled their horses, and she could see the shock in their eyes. A woman, alone, standing between them and what they'd come to take. Her father's voice echoed in her mind from last night's argument. "No man will ever want you if you keep this up." She'd told him to go to hell. Now she was proving him right, 1 bullet at a time. Before we continue with Clara's story, please subscribe to our channel and follow this journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Judge Michael O'Rourke slammed his fist on the dinner table 3 nights before that dawn shootout, making the china rattle. "You shot at the Henderson boy."
"He was on our property,"
Clara said, cutting into her steak with deliberate precision. "Trying to drive off 6 of our best breeding mares." "He said he was courting you." Clara's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Courting me? Is that what they're calling horse theft now?" Her father's face reddened. "Every eligible man in 3 counties has tried to court you, Clara. Every single one. And you've sent them all packing with your wildness." "My wildness?" Clara set down her knife and fork, meeting her father's eyes with the same unflinching gaze that had made grown men back down in his courtroom. "You mean my refusal to pretend I'm helpless? My ability to run this ranch better than half the men who've come sniffing around for a free ride? I mean your complete disregard for what's proper, what's expected." "Expected by who?" Clara stood, her chair scraping against the wooden floor.
"By you? By those pompous fools who think a woman with land is just a prize to be won?"
"By society, Clara. By the world you live in."
"Then maybe I'm living in the wrong world."
She walked out, leaving her father alone with his anger and his untouched meal. The night air hit her face like a benediction, cool and clean after the suffocating atmosphere inside. She could hear the horses in the corral, could smell the sage and juniper that grew wild on the hillsides. This was her world, not the parlors and tea parties her father kept trying to force her into. The ranch hand's bunkhouse showed lamplight through its windows. She could hear them talking, their voices carrying on the still air. "Boss's daughter put 3 shots through the Henderson boy's hat," one of them was saying, and there was admiration in his voice. "Never touched his head, just scared him so bad he near about wet himself." "She's too wild for any man," another voice said.
"Beautiful as a sunset, skilled as any cowhand I've seen. But Lord, who'd want to wake up to that temper every morning?"
Clara smiled grimly and kept walking toward the stables. Let them talk. She'd been hearing variations of the same conversation her entire adult life. The barn was dark and quiet, smelling of hay and horse and leather. She found Dancer, her Palomino mare, and pressed her forehead against the horse's warm neck. "What's wrong with me, girl?" she whispered. "Why can't I just smile and simper like they want? Why can't I pretend I need saving?" Dancer snorted softly, and Clara laughed. "You understand. You'd kick any stallion who tried to dominate you, wouldn't you?" "Most stallions don't know the difference between dominance and partnership." Clara spun, her hand going instinctively to the pistol she always wore. A man stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, utterly still. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded.
"Elias Crow. Your father hired me this afternoon. Said you needed help with the cattle drive to Denver."
"My father hired you?" Clara's voice dripped with acid. "Without asking me?" "He's the judge. I assumed he owned the ranch. My mother's family owned this ranch. She left it to me when she died. My father lives here because I allow it." Clara moved closer, studying this stranger. He had dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that gave nothing away. "Why would I need help?" "You've got 200 head to move, and you've lost 3 hands in the past month. The judge said they quit." They quit because I wouldn't let them slack off, or steal from me, or treat me like I was some decoration. Clara crossed her arms. What makes you think you'll last any longer? I don't steal. I don't slack. And I don't care if my boss wears a dress or trousers. Clara studied him for a long moment. You always this quiet? I talk when I have something worth saying.
Despite herself, Clara felt a flicker of curiosity. Most men who came to the ranch either tried to flirt with her or treated her with barely concealed contempt. This Elias Crow did neither. He just stood there, waiting, utterly calm. Fine, you can stay, but you follow my orders, not my father's. And the first time you try to tell me what I should or shouldn't do because I'm a woman, you're gone. Understood? Understood. Bunkhouse is that way. We start at dawn. Elias nodded and turned to go, then paused. Miss O'Rourke? That business with the Henderson boy? You were right to scare him. A man who'd steal from someone he's supposedly courting isn't worth spit. He was gone before Clara could respond. The next morning, Clara was up before sunrise, as always. She found Elias already in the corral, working with one of the younger horses, a fractious gelding that had thrown two of their best riders. Be careful with Storm, she called out. He's got a mean streak. Elias didn't answer, just kept working. His movements were economical, precise. He wasn't trying to break the horse's spirit, Clara realized. He was communicating with it, establishing understanding rather than dominance. 20 minutes later, Storm was trotting calmly around the corral, responding to the lightest touch of Elias's hands. Where'd you learn to do that? Clara asked. Comanche, Elias said simply. You lived with the Comanche? For a while. Clara wanted to ask more, but something in his tone suggested the subject was closed. Instead, she said, We're riding out to check the north pasture. There's been talk of rustlers in the area. I'll saddle up. They rode in silence through the morning, which suited Clara fine. Most men felt compelled to fill every silence with words, usually about themselves. Elias just rode, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, missing nothing. It was Elias who spotted the fence first, cut clean through in 3 places. Recent, he said, dismounting to examine the wire. Last night, maybe. Clara felt fury rising in her chest. 4th time this month. They're getting bolder. They're testing you, seeing how much they can take before you push back. I've been pushing back. I've ridden out here every night for a week. One person can't watch everything. Elias straightened, his eyes meeting hers. You're good, Miss O'Rourke. Maybe the best rider and shot I've seen. But you can't be everywhere at once. So what do you suggest? The question came out sharper than she intended, defensive. Let me help. That's what you're paying me for. Before Clara could respond, a shot rang out. The bullet kicked up dirt 3 feet from Dancer's hooves, and the mare reared. Clara controlled her with practiced ease, but her pistol was already in her hand. 3 riders emerged from behind a rocky outcrop, spread out in a semicircle. Clara recognized the one in the middle, Tom Gaines's foreman, a brutal man named Pike. Well, well, Pike drawled, the wild woman herself. And she brought a friend. You're on O'Rourke land, Pike, Clara said coldly. Turn around and ride back to Gaines, or I'll shoot you for trespassing. Pike laughed. Big talk from a little girl. Mr. Gaines is getting tired of asking nice for this land. Maybe it's time we stopped asking. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. Try it. 3 against 2, sweetheart, and one of you's wearing a skirt. I like those odds. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Elias's hand moved, and suddenly he had a rifle. Clara hadn't even seen him draw it from his saddle. The shot took Pike's hat clean off his head. Next one's through your skull, Elias said,
his voice utterly calm. "Your move." Pike's face went white, then red. "You're making a mistake, friend. I'm not your friend."
And the only mistake here is you thinking you could threaten Miss O'Rourke without consequences.
Elias chambered another round. "Right away. Now." For a moment, Clara thought Pike would try something stupid. But whatever he saw in Elias's eyes made him think better of it. He wheeled his horse and rode off, his two companions following. When they were gone, Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was necessary," Elias finished. "They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more men." "How did you know I wouldn't shoot first?" "Because you're smart. Killing Gaines's men would give him legal cover to come after you. Scaring them just makes them think twice." Clara stared at this quiet stranger who'd somehow read the situation perfectly. "Who are you really, Elias Crow?" "Just a man looking for work." "You're more than that. The way you move, the way you handle a gun, you've done this before." "Everyone's done something before." Elias turned his horse.
"We should get back. Tell your father what happened."
But Clara reached out, her hand catching his bridle.
"Wait. I need to know. Can I trust you?"
Elias looked at her for a long moment. "I give you my word, Miss O'Rourke. I'm here to help, nothing more. What I was before doesn't matter."
"It matters to me."
"Why? Because you can't stand not knowing? Or because you're looking for a reason to send me away before you start depending on someone?" The words hit harder than Clara expected. She released his bridle, angry at herself for the flush she felt creeping up her neck.
"I don't depend on anyone."
"I know. That's what makes you dangerous, to yourself and to people who care about you."
"You don't know anything about me."
"I know you're fighting a war on 3 fronts. Against the rustlers, against your father's expectations, and against your own fear that letting someone help makes you weak." Elias's voice remained gentle, which somehow made his words cut deeper.
"That's an awful lot of fighting for one person."
Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the words stuck in her throat because he wasn't wrong. Not entirely. "We should get back," she said finally. Her father was waiting on the porch when they returned. One look at Clara's face told him something had happened. "Pike and his boys," Clara said, dismounting. "They cut the north fence and were waiting for us. Made threats. Said Gaines is done asking nice." Judge O'Rourke's face darkened. "Tom Gaines is a snake, but he's too smart to start an open war. He knows I could bring the law down on him." "The law's in Denver, Father. We're out here alone. By the time any marshal arrived, Gaines could have taken this ranch and made it look legal." "Then what do you suggest?" Clara was surprised to hear the question. Usually her father just told her what to do. "We double the night watch. Set up a rotation so someone's always awake. And we move up the cattle drive. Get the herd to Denver before Gaines realizes what we're doing. Once we have that money, we can hire more men, fortify our position." "The herd's not ready." "The herd's ready enough. Another week, and Gaines will make his move. I can feel it." Judge O'Rourke looked at Elias. "What do you think, Crow?" "I think your daughter knows this ranch better than anyone. If she says move now, I'd listen." Clara felt a strange warmth at Elias's words. Not because he agreed with her. Plenty of men had agreed with her when they thought it would win her favor. But because he said it with utter conviction, as if her judgment needed no validation from him or anyone else. "All right," her father said finally. "We move in 3 days. But Clara—"
"I know. Be careful."
That night, Clara took first watch. The ranch was quiet under a half-moon, peaceful. Too peaceful. She found herself thinking about Elias's words, about the wars she was fighting.
She'd always told herself her independence was strength, that needing no one made her invulnerable. But sitting there in the dark, watching for threats that might or might not come, she felt something she rarely acknowledged: loneliness. A sound made her turn. Elias was walking toward her, carrying 2 cups. "Coffee," he said, handing her one. "Figured you could use it." "You're supposed to be sleeping. You've got the dawn watch." "Couldn't sleep." He sat down on the fence rail beside her, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Too quiet." "That's what I was thinking." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their coffee. Clara found herself studying Elias's profile, the strong jaw, the watchful eyes. He was handsome in a hard, weathered way, but that wasn't what drew her attention. It was his stillness, his complete lack of pretense. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." "Why are you really here? A man with your skills could find work anywhere. Why a broken-down ranch in the middle of nowhere?" Elias was quiet for so long, Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because it's the middle of nowhere. Because no one asks questions. And because your father offered me a job without requiring references or a history." "You're running from something." "We're all running from something, Miss O'Rourke. Some of us just have more reason to run than others." "Are you dangerous?" "To you? No." He turned to look at her directly. "To men like Pike and Gaines? Yes." Clara should have been alarmed, should have sent him away right then. But instead she felt safer than she had in months. "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to need dangerous in the days ahead." "You're probably right about that." They finished their coffee in silence, and when Elias stood to go, Clara said, "Thank you, for today. For not trying to take over or tell me what to do." "You don't need someone to tell you what to do. You need someone to watch your back while you do it." He tipped his hat. "Get some sleep, Miss O'Rourke. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He was right about that. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Gathering the herd, checking supplies, planning the route to Denver. Clara worked alongside her ranch hands, refusing to delegate anything she could do herself. She noticed Elias doing the same, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do, earning respect through action rather than words. On the second night, Clara's father pulled her aside. "I don't trust him." "Who? Elias?" "He's hiding something. The way he carries himself, the way he watches everything. That's not a ranch hand. That's a man with training. Military, maybe. Or law enforcement." "Or an outlaw," Clara said, voicing the thought that had been nagging at her. "Exactly. We don't know anything about him, Clara. For all we know, he could be working with Gaines." "He's not." Clara surprised herself with her certainty. "I don't know what he is or what he's running from, but he's not working with Gaines. I'd stake my life on it." "You might be doing exactly that." Clara looked at her father, really looked at him. He'd aged in the years since her mother died, his hair going white, lines deepening around his eyes. He was afraid, she realized, not of Elias specifically, but of losing control, of watching his daughter make decisions he couldn't influence. "Father," she said gently, "I know you want to protect me, but I'm not a little girl anymore. I haven't been for a long time." "That's what scares me." Judge O'Rourke's voice was rough. "You're so determined to prove you don't need anyone that you won't see help when it's offered, or danger when it's standing right in front of you." "Elias isn't a danger to me." "How do you know?" "Because—" Clara stopped, searching for words. "Because he treats me like a person, not a problem to be solved or a prize to be won. He doesn't try to change me or protect me from myself. He just helps. No strings, no expectations, no judgment. And that doesn't strike you as suspicious? A man with no past, who wants nothing? Everyone wants something, Father. I just don't think Elias wants what you're afraid he wants. The conversation haunted Clara through the night and into the next morning, when they finally started the cattle drive. 200 head of prime Texas Longhorns, moving through the high country toward Denver. It should have taken 10 days. Clara planned to do it in 7. They made good time the first day, the cattle docile in the cool morning air. Elias rode point with Clara, guiding the herd through the narrow passes. He seemed to know the land, anticipating trouble spots before they appeared. It was late afternoon when Clara saw the riders, 5 of them, spread out along a ridge overlooking the trail. She recognized Pike's distinctive black hat. "They're not even trying to hide," she said to Elias. "Why would they? They want you to see them, want you to know they're watching." "So what do we do?" "Keep moving. Don't show fear. And don't let them separate you from the herd." Clara passed the word to her ranch hands, saw them check their weapons. The tension was palpable, like waiting for a storm to break. But the riders just watched. When the herd passed below their ridge, they turned and rode away. "That was a warning," Elias said. "I know. Gaines is letting us know he can hit us whenever he wants. Or he's waiting for us to get farther from the ranch, somewhere remote, where there won't be witnesses." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we'd better be ready when he makes his move." They made camp that night in a box canyon, defensible but risky. If someone blocked the entrance, they'd be trapped. But it gave them water and grazing for the cattle. Clara was checking the picket line when she heard voices, angry voices. She hurried toward the sound and found 2 of her ranch hands facing off, fists clenched. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Jack here says we should turn back," one of them, a young cowboy named Billy, said. "Says this drive's cursed." "It ain't cursed, it's suicide," Jack shot back. "Gaines has riders all over these hills. We're sitting ducks out here." "We're not turning back," Clara said firmly. "We're 3 days from Denver. We keep going." "With all due respect, Miss O'Rourke, you're asking us to die for your stubbornness." The word stung because part of Clara wondered if Jack was right. Was she risking these men's lives because she couldn't bear to back down? Because admitting defeat felt like admitting her father and all those other men were right about her? "No one's dying," Elias said quietly, stepping into the circle. "Gaines wants the ranch, not a murder charge. He'll try to stampede the herd, maybe rough us up, but he won't kill anyone unless he has to." "And you know this how?" Jack demanded. "Because I used to be a territorial marshal. I know how men like Gaines think. He's a businessman, not a killer. He'll push until someone pushes back, but he won't cross the line that brings the real law down on him." The revelation hung in the air. A marshal. Clara felt pieces clicking into place. The way Elias moved, his calm authority, his understanding of tactics and law. "Used to be?" Billy asked. "I had a disagreement with some powerful people about what the law should protect and who it should serve. They won. I left." "So you're wanted?" Jack's hand moved toward his pistol. "No, just unwelcome in certain places." Elias's voice remained calm. "I give you my word. I'm on your side. And I'm telling you, turning back now is exactly what Gaines wants. He wants you scared, divided, doubting your boss. Don't give him that satisfaction." Clara felt a surge of gratitude toward Elias, quickly followed by irritation at herself for feeling grateful. She was supposed to handle this herself. "Jack," she said, "you're free to go if you want. I won't hold it against you. But if you stay, I need you all in. No more talk of turning back." Jack looked at her for a long moment, then at Elias, then back at Clara. "I'll stay. But if Gaines comes, I want your word we'll fight, not run." "You have it." The tension broke, and the men dispersed. Clara found herself alone with Elias by the fire. "A territorial marshal," she said. "That's quite a secret to keep." "Didn't see how it was relevant." "Your whole past isn't relevant?" "My past is exactly that, past. What matters is what I do now." Clara studied him across the firelight. "What happened? Why did you really leave?" Elias was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost painful. There was a land dispute. Rich ranchers trying to force out homesteaders. The law said the homesteaders had rights, but the ranchers had money and influence. My superiors told me to look the other way. I couldn't. "So you stood up for the homesteaders?" "I tried. But money talks louder than justice. The ranchers brought in hired guns, and when the shooting started, good people died. People I'd promised to protect." He looked away. "The badge couldn't save them, so I took it off." "That's not running away, Elias. That's called having principles." "Principles don't bring back the dead." Clara sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth from his body. "No, but they're what separate us from men like Gaines and Pike. They're what make us worth saving." Elias turned to look at her, and in the firelight, his eyes were haunted. "Is that what you think you're doing? Saving this ranch?" "I'm fighting for what's mine, what my mother left me. That's not the same thing." "Isn't it? You're willing to risk everything, your life, your father's ranch, your hands' lives, because you can't stand the thought of letting Gaines win, of proving all those men right who said you couldn't handle this alone." The words hit like a physical blow, because they were true. Clara felt tears sting her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "Maybe, but what's the alternative? Give up? Let Gaines take what he wants because fighting back is too dangerous?" "No, but maybe, just maybe, you could admit you don't have to fight alone, that accepting help isn't weakness." "I don't need—" "I know, you don't need anyone. You've made that very clear. But Miss O'Rourke, there's a difference between needing someone and choosing to let them stand beside you." Clara stared at him, feeling something shift inside her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully, brick by brick, suddenly felt less solid. "I don't know how to do that. Let people in." "Neither do I, but maybe we could figure it out together." Before Clara could respond, a shout rang out from the picket line. She and Elias were on their feet instantly, guns drawn. "Riders coming," Billy called. "At least 20 of them." 20. Gaines had brought an army. Clara's mind raced, calculating odds, positions, strategies. They were outnumbered 4-1, trapped in this canyon with the herd. "Get everyone armed," she ordered. "Circle the wagons at the canyon mouth. We make our stand there." "Miss O'Rourke," Elias said quietly, "we can't win this fight." "I'm not giving up my herd without a fight." "I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to be smart." He pointed to the canyon walls. "Those riders will come through that entrance expecting a fight. What if we're not there?" "What are you suggesting?" "The north wall. There's a game trail, narrow but passable. We could move the herd up and around, come up behind them while they're searching the canyon. That trail's barely wide enough for one horse. It'll take hours to move 200 head up there." "Do you have a better idea?" Clara didn't. And as much as she hated to admit it, Elias's plan made sense. "All right, but if we lose even one steer—" "We won't. Trust me." Trust. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara realized she was at a crossroads. She could keep fighting alone, keep proving she didn't need anyone, and probably get her people killed. Or she could trust this mysterious former marshal with the haunted eyes and take a chance on partnership over pride. "Let's move," she said. The first gunshot echoed through the canyon just as they started moving the lead steers toward the North Wall Trail. "They're early," Elias said, his voice tight. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they realize the canyon's empty." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady as she guided Dancer toward the narrow trail opening. "Billy, Jack, get those cattle moving. Don't let them bunch up or we'll lose everything." The game trail was worse than she remembered, barely 3 feet wide in places, hugging the canyon wall with a sheer drop on one side. Moving 200 panicked longhorns up this path in the dark was madness. But staying meant certain defeat. "Miss O'Rourke!" One of the younger hands, Tommy, rode up beside her, his face pale. "I can't do this. My horse won't take that trail." "Then leave your horse and walk the cattle up on foot," Clara snapped. "We don't have time for fear, Tommy. Move or get out of the way." Tommy's face crumpled, and for a moment, Clara felt a stab of guilt. He was barely 18, probably had never faced real danger in his life. But before she could soften her words, Elias was there. "Tommy," Elias said quietly, "I need you to do something for me. Take your horse down to the canyon entrance and fire 3 shots every few minutes. Make Games think we're still here, barricaded in. Can you do that?" "By myself?" Tommy's voice cracked. "You'll have cover from the rocks. Fire and move. Fire and move. Don't let them pin down where you are. After about 20 shots, ride hard east and circle back to meet us. Think you can handle that?" Tommy straightened in his saddle, some of the fear leaving his eyes. "Yes, sir, I can do that." "Good man." Elias clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't be a hero. If they get too close, you run. Understood?" "Understood." As Tommy rode away, Clara said, "That was kind, giving him a purpose instead of making him feel useless." "He needed to feel useful. You cutting him down wouldn't have helped." "I don't have time for hand-holding, Elias. Not tonight." "There's always time for basic decency, even in a war." The word stung because he was right. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but more gunshots erupted from the canyon entrance. Gaines's men, getting closer. "Move!" she shouted to her hands. "Get those cattle up that trail! Now!" The next hour was pure chaos. Cattle balked at the narrow path, their hooves slipping on loose rock. One steer panicked and nearly dragged Billy off the cliff before Elias roped it and hauled it back to safety. The night air filled with the sounds of bawling cattle, shouted orders, and periodic gunshots from Tommy's position. Clara worked alongside her men, her rope singing through the air as she guided reluctant steers onto the trail. Sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cool night air. Her shoulders screamed with exhaustion. But she couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. Every minute they delayed was another minute for Gaines to discover their plan. "Clara!" Her father appeared on horseback, his face furious. "What in God's name are you doing? We should be fighting, not running." "We're not running. We're being smart. There's a difference." "Smart? You're risking the entire herd on this insane trail. One stampede and we lose everything. And if we stay, Gaines takes everything. At least this way, we have a chance." "A chance?" Judge O'Rourke's voice rose. "You're gambling with other men's lives based on the word of a stranger we know nothing about." "I know enough," Clara met her father's eyes. "I know he's been right about everything so far. I know he could have run when those riders showed up, but he stayed. That's enough for me." "It's not enough for me. I won't watch you throw away everything your mother built on some leap of faith." The words hit Clara like a slap. Her mother. Always her mother. The ghost that hung over everything Clara did, every decision she made. The impossible standard she could never quite meet. "Mother would have trusted her instincts," Clara said, her voice shaking. "She wouldn't have let fear make her choices." "Your mother knew when to fight and when to negotiate. She didn't confuse stubbornness with strength.
Enough!
Elias's voice cut through the argument like a knife. He rode between them, his face hard. Judge, with respect, we don't have time for this. Those riders will figure out we're gone any minute now. When they do, they'll come looking. We need everyone focused on moving this herd, not fighting each other. Don't you dare tell me, Father, he's right. Clara forced herself to speak calmly. We can argue later. Right now, I need you to trust me. Please. Judge O'Rourke stared at his daughter, and Clara saw something shift in his expression. Not agreement, exactly, but maybe understanding or resignation. Fine, he said finally. But when this is over, we're having a long conversation about your judgment. If we survive, I'll look forward to it. Her father rode away, and Clara sagged in her saddle. Elias moved his horse closer. You all right? He thinks I'm crazy. He thinks he's losing you. That's different. To what? A ranch? A cattle drive? To independence, to your own choices, to maybe trusting someone who isn't him. Elias paused. That's terrifying for a father. Clara looked at him sharply. You have children? No, but I had a father once. Lost him to his own stubbornness and pride. Swore I'd never make his mistakes. And yet here you are, running from powerful men because you wouldn't compromise your principles. Sounds like stubbornness to me. Elias smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Fair point. Maybe stubbornness runs in both our families. A massive crash echoed from the trail below, followed by shouting. Clara wheeled Dancer around to see 3 steers tangled together, blocking the path. Behind them, 50 more cattle were bunching up, beginning to panic. Clear that blockage, she shouted. But even as she said it, she knew they were in trouble. The steers were too tightly wedged, and the panicked cattle behind them were pushing forward, threatening to shove everything over the cliff. I've got this, Billy called, riding toward the tangle with his rope. But his horse spooked at the edge, and Billy went flying. He landed hard on the narrow trail, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Billy! Clara spurred Dancer forward, but Elias was faster. He leaped from his horse, landing on the trail near Billy, just as the trapped steers began to thrash. One massive horn swung toward Billy's head. Elias grabbed Billy and rolled, pulling them both flat against the canyon wall as the horn whistled past. The steer's momentum carried it forward, and with a bellow, it plunged over the edge, taking another steer with it. Clara felt her stomach drop. Losing cattle, losing men. This was exactly what she'd feared. But Elias was already moving. He grabbed Billy and half-carried, half-dragged him to safety, then turned back to the remaining blocked steer. Get back! Clara shouted. It's not worth... Elias didn't listen. He approached the panicked animal with his hands raised, speaking in a language Clara didn't understand. Comanche, she realized. The same sounds he'd used to calm storm. The steer's eyes rolled white, foam flecking its mouth. It was seconds from jumping or charging. But Elias kept talking, kept moving closer with those slow, deliberate movements. Then his hand was on the steer's head, between its horns, and the animal went still. Not calm, exactly, but listening. Now, Clara, Elias said softly, rope its horns, gentle. Clara's rope sailed through the air and settled around the steer's horns like it was choreographed. She pulled, Elias pushed, and suddenly the blockage was clear. The cattle behind began moving again. How did you... Clara started. Later, we need to check Billy. Billy was conscious, but in obvious pain. My legs broke, Miss O'Rourke. I'm sorry, I messed up. You did fine, Billy. You tried to help. That's all anyone can ask. Clara looked at Elias. Can you splint it? Out here, in the dark? Best I can do is stabilize it
and hope we get him to a doctor before infection sets in. Then do it. We'll put him in one of the wagons. As Elias worked on Billy's leg, using torn strips of shirt and a broken rifle stock as a splint, Clara heard Tommy's signal shots growing more erratic. Either he was running out of ammunition, or Gaines's men were getting too close. "Jack," she called, "ride down and bring Tommy back. His diversion's done." Jack nodded and disappeared into the darkness. Clara returned her attention to the herd, which was still moving up the trail. Slower than she'd hoped, but moving. 2 hours later, they crested the ridge. The land opened up before them, a high plateau that stretched for miles. Clara had hunted up here as a girl, knew every creek and hiding place. If they could reach the timber on the far side, they'd have cover and multiple escape routes to Denver. "Everyone here?" she asked, counting heads. All her hands were accounted for, including Jack and Tommy, who'd just rejoined them. The herd looked intact, except for the 2 steers they'd lost on the trail. "We made it," her father said, and there was wonder in his voice. "By God, Clara, we actually made it. We're not safe yet. Gaines will find our trail once the sun comes up. Then we don't stop moving." Elias pointed east. "There's a river about 10 miles that way. We push hard, get the cattle across, and we'll have a natural barrier between us and pursuit. You know this country?" "I've been through here before, long time ago." Clara wanted to ask more, but exhaustion was catching up with her. They'd been moving for nearly 6 hours straight, and the adrenaline that had sustained her was fading fast. "All right," she said. "We push for the river. 2-hour rotations so everyone gets some rest. Father, you take first watch with Tommy. Elias and I will scout ahead." Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "Be careful." Clara and Elias rode ahead of the herd, letting the darkness and distance create a bubble of privacy around them. "That was close," Clara said finally. "With Billy, with the blockage, I nearly got people killed back there." "Nearly doesn't count. Everyone's alive, the herd's mostly intact. You made the right call." "Did I? Or did I just get lucky?" Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared by knowing that trail existed. The opportunity came when you were willing to take the risk. Elias glanced at her. "That's not luck. That's leadership." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest, followed immediately by suspicion. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Nice? I'm stating facts." "You keep defending me, supporting my decisions, even when they're risky. Why?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Because I've spent my whole life watching men tear down women who threatened them. Watching women doubt themselves because everyone told them they should. And I'm tired of it." "That's it? Some kind of, what, feminist principle?" "That's part of it. The other part is that you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Myself. Before I learned that being right doesn't always mean you win. Before I realized that the hardest thing in the world isn't standing alone. It's knowing when to let someone stand with you." Clara felt her throat tighten. "And you think I need to learn that lesson?" "I think we both do." They rode in silence for a while, and Clara found herself studying Elias again, really looking at him. The way he sat his horse with easy grace, the way his eyes never stopped moving, always watching for danger. The quiet strength that radiated from him, like heat from a fire. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask." "That land dispute you mentioned, the one that cost you your badge. Who died?" Elias's jaw tightened. 3 homesteaders, a woman and her 2 sons. The oldest was 12. "God, Elias." "I'd promised them protection, told them the law would keep them safe. I believed it, too." His voice went rough. "Then the ranchers brought in guns for hire.
and my superiors ordered me to stand down. Said it was a civil matter, outside our jurisdiction. I refused. By the time I got there, it was too late. What happened to the men who killed them? Nothing. They claimed self-defense, said the homesteaders shot first. No witnesses willing to testify otherwise. And the ranchers? Got their land, built a nice mansion on the graves of that family. Elias looked at Clara, and his eyes were haunted. That's when I realized the badge didn't mean anything. Justice doesn't flow from a piece of tin. It flows from people willing to stand up, even when it costs them everything.
Is that why you're here? Standing up for me? I'm here because your father offered me a job. I'm staying because... He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. Because walking away from you feels like walking away from those homesteaders all over again. And I can't do that. Not again. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, some barrier she'd kept locked for so long. Elias, Gunshots erupted from behind them. Not the sporadic fire of Tommy's diversion, but sustained, deliberate shooting. Clara and Elias wheeled their horses and raced back toward the herd. What they found made Clara's blood run cold. Riders, at least 15 of them, had caught up with the tail end of the herd. They weren't shooting to kill. They were shooting to stampede. "They're trying to scatter the cattle," her father shouted over the chaos. "If we lose the herd, we lose everything." The longhorns were panicking, breaking in all directions. Clara's carefully preserved herd was disintegrating before her eyes. "Form a line," she shouted. "Turn them back toward each other. Don't let them scatter." Her hands moved into position, but the riders kept coming, firing into the air, driving the cattle further apart. Clara recognized Pike at the front, his face twisted with vicious glee. "Give it up, wild woman," he shouted. "You can't win. Gaines owns this territory. He owns you." Something snapped inside Clara. All the years of being called wild, being told she couldn't handle the ranch, being treated like a problem instead of a person. It all came roaring up in a wave of fury. "Like hell he does!" She drew her pistol and fired, not at Pike, but at the ground in front of his horse. The animal reared, and Pike went flying. "Clara, no!" her father shouted. But Clara was already moving. She rode straight into the chaos, her ropes singing as she caught cattle and turned them back. Bullets whined past her head, but she didn't care. This was her herd, her mother's legacy, and she'd be damned if she let Tom Gaines steal it. Elias appeared at her side, his rifle cracking as he fired over the heads of Gaines's men. "What are you doing? You're going to get yourself killed." "I'm fighting for what's mine." "There's a difference between brave and stupid, Clara. This is stupid." "Then leave. I don't need you." The words came out harsh, defensive, and as soon as Clara said them, she regretted it. But it was too late. Elias's face went hard, closed off. "Fine," he said. "Do it your way." He wheeled his horse and rode away, back toward the main body of the herd. Clara felt a stab of panic. Had she just driven away the one person who'd stood by her? But there was no time to think about it. More riders were coming. She roped another steer, turned it back, roped another. Her arm burned with exhaustion. Her horse was foaming with sweat. But she kept going, kept fighting, because that's all she knew how to do. Then she saw him, Tom Gaines himself, riding a black stallion that probably cost more than her entire ranch. He sat watching the chaos with a small, satisfied smile. Clara rode straight at him. "Call off your men, Gaines." "Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? That would be murder, Miss O'Rourke. And unlike you, I have lawyers who could prove it." "You're trying to steal my cattle." "I'm simply protecting my interests. You're trespassing on land I have legal claim to."
"Legal claim? This is open range."
"Not anymore. I filed papers in Denver last month. This entire plateau belongs to me now. You're the trespasser." Gaines's smile widened. "And if some of your cattle get lost in the confusion of my men defending my property, well, that's just unfortunate." Clara's finger tightened on her trigger. One shot. She could end this right now. But Gaines was right. With all these witnesses, it would be murder, and she'd hang. "I can see you thinking about it," Gaines said. "Wondering if you could get away with it. But you can't. You're beaten, Clara. Just accept it with some dignity."
"Never."
"Then you're a fool, and foolish women end up losing everything." A massive explosion shook the ground. Clara's horse reared, and she fought to control it. When she could see again, the entire eastern edge of the plateau was on fire, a wall of flame cutting off Gaines's escape route. "What the hell?" Gaines started, but then his men were shouting, wheeling their horses away from the fire. Clara saw Elias riding hard from the direction of the flames, and she understood. He'd set a fire break, using the dry grass to create a barrier between Gaines's men and their line of retreat. "Time to go!" Elias shouted as he reached her. "Fire will drive the cattle toward the river. Move!" "But Gaines is about to have bigger problems than us. Move, Clara." Gaines's men were already fleeing, their horses panicked by the approaching flames. Pike tried to rally them, but the fire was spreading too fast, eating up the dry plateau grass like kindling. Clara made her choice. She turned dancer and rode after Elias, her hands already moving to gather the scattered cattle. The fire was doing exactly what Elias said, driving the herd together, pushing them toward the river. "You set a fire!" her father shouted when they reached him. "Are you insane?" "Controlled burn," Elias shouted back. "It'll hit the river and die, but it buys us time." "Time for what?" "To get these cattle across and put a barrier between us and Gaines." It was madness. It was brilliant. And Clara found herself laughing as they drove the herd toward the river, the flames at their backs lighting up the night sky like dawn. They reached the river just as the eastern horizon began to lighten with actual dawn. The cattle plunged into the water, desperate to escape the smoke and heat. Clara's hands worked like machines, guiding, pushing, keeping the animals moving forward. By the time the last steer crossed, the fire had reached the river and died, leaving behind a blackened wasteland that would be impossible for Gaines's men to cross. "We did it," Billy said from his position in the wagon, his voice full of wonder. "We actually did it." Clara looked at her herd, muddy and exhausted, but intact. Looked at her hands, battered but alive. Looked at her father, who was staring at her with something that might have been respect. Then she looked at Elias, who was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what? You're the one who refused to give up." "For standing with me anyway, even when I pushed you away." Elias's expression softened. "That's what partners do, Clara. They stand together, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Partners. The word settled over Clara like a warm blanket. Not boss and hired hand, not woman and protector. Partners. "We should keep moving," her father said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "Gaines will find a way around that fire break eventually." "Let him try," Clara said. "We're 2 days from Denver now. By the time he catches up, we'll have sold the herd and have enough money to hire real protection." "If we survive the next 2 days." Clara smiled, feeling genuine hope for the first time in months. "We will. We've got something Gaines doesn't." "What's that?" She looked at Elias, at her loyal hands, at her father who was finally seeing her as she truly was. "Each other." But having each other meant nothing if they didn't make it to Denver alive.
The relief Clara felt crossing that river lasted exactly 2 hours, until they found the bridge destroyed. Someone had used dynamite on the only crossing point for 50 miles, leaving nothing but charred timber and twisted metal jutting from the water. "Gaines," her father said, his voice flat. "He knew we'd come this way." Clara stared at the wreckage, her mind racing. How? How could he possibly get ahead of us? He didn't have to. Elias dismounted, examining the blast pattern. This was done days ago, maybe a week. He planned for every route you might take. So what do? We can't ford the herd here. The current's too strong. And backtracking adds 3 days we don't have. There's another way. Elias pointed south. Narrow crossing about 8 miles down. Rocky, dangerous, but passable if we're careful. And if Gaines knows about it? Then we'll deal with that when we get there. Clara wanted to scream. Every step forward seemed to bring 2 steps back. But she swallowed her frustration and turned to her exhausted men. We move south. Stay alert. Gaines knows we're trapped, and trapped animals make mistakes. They pushed the herd along the riverbank, every man on edge. Tommy kept his hand on his pistol. Jack muttered prayers under his breath. Even the cattle seemed to sense the tension, moving with nervous energy that threatened to explode into panic. It was Billy who spotted the riders first. "Miss O'Rourke, up on the ridge!" Clara counted quickly. 20 men, maybe more, spread out in a line that blocked their path to the southern crossing. And at the center, unmistakable even at this distance, was Tom Gaines. "He's got us pinned," her father said. "River on one side, his men on the other. We're sitting ducks." "No." Clara's voice came out hard. "We're not finished yet. Elias, how many men does it take to hold that ridge?" "Against a frontal assault? All of them. But if someone came at them from behind, they'd have to split their forces." Clara finished his thought. "How long would you need?" "Clara, no." Her father grabbed her arm. "You're not seriously considering. I'm considering everything. How long, Elias?" Elias met her eyes, and she saw respect there, mixed with concern. "An hour. Maybe less if I move fast." "Then move fast. Father, you and the men hold here. Keep the herd calm. When you hear shooting from behind Gaines's position, that's your signal to push through." "And what will you be doing?" her father demanded. "Buying Elias time." Clara checked her pistol, her rifle, her spare ammunition. "Gaines wants to talk. I'll give him talk. Keep him focused on me while Elias circles around." "That's suicide." "It's strategy. There's a difference." Elias was already mounting his horse. "Clara, if this goes wrong..." "It won't. You won't let it." Something passed between them in that moment. Something deeper than words. Trust, maybe. Or recognition that they were past the point of turning back, in more ways than one. "Be careful," Elias said. "You too." He rode off, staying low and using the river's bank for cover. Clara watched him disappear, then turned to face the ridge. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady as she mounted Dancer. "Where are you going?" her father asked, real fear in his voice now. "To have a conversation with Tom Gaines. Keep the men ready." She rode toward the ridge alone, her white shirt making her an easy target. Every instinct screamed at her to take cover, but she kept Dancer at a steady walk, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. Gaines rode down to meet her halfway, Pike and 2 other men flanking him. Up close, Clara could see the expensive cut of his suit, the gold watch chain, the carefully groomed beard. He looked like a businessman, not a rustler, which made him more dangerous, not less. "Miss O'Rourke," he said pleasantly.
I was hoping we could talk. Talk? You destroyed a bridge and ambushed my cattle drive. That's not talking, Gaines. That's war.
War is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as negotiation through other means. He smiled, showing perfect teeth. You're in a difficult position, trapped between my men and a river you can't cross. Your cattle are exhausted. Your men are terrified. And you, well, you're just one woman trying to do a man's job. Clara felt rage building in her chest, but forced herself to stay calm. Keep him talking. Buy time. What do you want? I want what I've always wanted. Your ranch. Your land. But I'm willing to be reasonable. Sell me the O'Rourke property at a fair price, and I'll let you and your herd pass. You can start over somewhere else. Fair price? You mean the fraction of what it's worth? I mean enough to pay your debts and have a little left over. That's more generous than you deserve after all the trouble you've caused. Trouble I've caused? You're the one who's been cutting fences, rustling cattle, destroying property. Gaines's smile never wavered. Prove it. You have no evidence, no witnesses willing to testify. Meanwhile, I have legal documents showing this entire region is under my control. Documents filed with the territorial government, signed by judges. Corrupt judges you've bought. Such accusations. You should be careful, Miss O'Rourke. Slander is a serious offense. Clara's hand drifted toward her pistol, and immediately 6 rifles pointed at her chest. Gaines tissed softly. Now, let's keep this civil. I'm trying to help you, Clara. May I call you Clara? No. Miss O'Rourke, then. You're a remarkable woman, truly. Your determination, your skill, it's admirable. But it's also wasted. You could have everything you want, security, respect, a proper life, if you just accept reality. And what reality is that? That the West belongs to men with vision and capital. Men like me. Women like you, no matter how capable, will always be fighting uphill. Wouldn't it be easier to stop fighting? Is that what you told those homesteaders you drove off their land? Just stop fighting? Something flickered in Gaines's eyes. I see you've been talking to your mysterious hired hand. Elias Crow, wasn't it? Do you know who he really is? Clara's stomach clenched, but she kept her face neutral. He's a good worker. He's a fugitive, former territorial marshal who assaulted a federal judge. There's a warrant for his arrest in 3 territories, $500 reward. Gaines leaned forward in his saddle. Is that who you're trusting with your life? A wanted criminal? You're lying. Am I? Ask him yourself. Ask him about Judge Harrington. Ask him what happened in Silver City. Gaines smiled. But you won't get the chance, because I've already sent word to the Territorial Marshal's office in Denver. By the time you arrive, if you arrive, they'll be waiting to arrest him. The world seemed to tilt under Clara. Elias had said he'd left because of a disagreement, not that he was wanted, not that he'd assaulted a judge. I can see you didn't know. Gaines's voice was almost kind. He's been using you, Clara, using your ranch as a hiding place. When the law comes for him, they'll take you down too. Aiding a fugitive is a serious crime. I don't believe you. Then you're a fool. But I'm still willing to make you a deal. Sell me the ranch, turn over Elias Crow, and I'll make sure the marshals understand you were an innocent dupe. You'll walk away free. Clara's mind raced. Was Gaines telling the truth? Had Elias been lying to her all along? Or was this just another manipulation, another way to divide her from the one person who'd stood by her? I need time to think. You have 1 hour. After that, my men will take what they want, and you'll get nothing. Not the ranch, not the cattle, not even your freedom. Gaines turned his horse.
Choose wisely, Miss O'Rourke. Your whole future depends on it. He rode back up the ridge, leaving Clara alone with her churning thoughts. 1 hour. 60 minutes to decide whether to trust Elias or save herself. She rode back to her men, her mind still reeling. Her father met her at the edge of camp. What did he say? He offered to let us pass if I sell him the ranch. Clara dismounted, her legs shaking. And turn over Elias. What? Her father's face darkened. He's using Crow as leverage? He says Elias is wanted, that he assaulted a federal judge, that there's a warrant in 3 territories. Judge O'Rourke went very still. Did he say which judge? Harrington. Why? Do you know him? Her father's expression was grim. Stephen Harrington, federal judge for the Arizona Territory. He was removed from the bench 2 years ago for accepting bribes and falsifying land claims. The investigation implicated him in at least a dozen illegal property seizures. Clara's heart leaped. So, Gaines is lying? Not entirely. There was an incident in Silver City. A marshal did assault Harrington, struck him in open court after Harrington ruled against a group of homesteaders the marshal had been trying to protect. But the charges were dropped when Harrington's corruption came to light. Her father looked at Clara. If that marshal was Elias Crow, he's not a criminal. He's a man who stood up to a corrupt system and paid the price. Relief flooded through Clara, so intense it made her dizzy. Elias had told the truth. Maybe not all of it, but the parts that mattered. So we don't deal with Gaines. We can't deal with Gaines. He's not offering a bargain. He's offering surrender. Whatever we give him, he'll want more. Men like that always do. Then we fight. Against 20 guns? Clara, be reasonable. A gunshot cracked from the ridge, followed by shouting. Then more shots, rapid and sustained. Elias had made his move. Now, Clara shouted to her men. Push the herd through while they're distracted. Move, move, move! The cattle surged forward, driven by the hands who'd been waiting for this moment. Gaines's men on the ridge were scrambling, caught between defending against Elias's attack from behind and stopping the herd from breaking through. Clara rode at the front, her rifle ready. Pike appeared in front of her, his face twisted with rage. You little... She shot him. Not to kill, but to wound. The bullet took him in the shoulder and spun him from his saddle. His horse bolted, and the gap in their line widened. Through there, Clara pointed, and her men drove the cattle toward the opening. Bullets whined past her head. One tugged at her sleeve. Another kicked up dirt at Dancer's feet. But she kept riding, kept shooting, kept the herd moving. Then she saw Elias, fighting 3 of Gaines's men at once. His rifle was empty, so he was using it like a club, the stock cracking against skulls and ribs. He was magnificent and terrifying, moving with a deadly grace that spoke of years of training. But he was also outnumbered. As Clara watched, one of the men got behind him, raising a rifle to bash in his skull. Clara didn't think. She just acted. Her pistol was in her hand, the shot so natural it felt like breathing. The man dropped, clutching his leg. Elias spun, saw her, and their eyes met across the chaos. In that instant, Clara understood what her father had been trying to tell her. This wasn't about pride or independence anymore. It was about choosing to stand with someone because standing alone meant losing everything that mattered. Get to the crossing, Elias shouted. I'll cover the rear. Not without you. Clara, go! No! She rode toward him, leaning down to offer her hand. We do this together or not at all. For a heartbeat, Elias just stared at her. Then he grabbed her hand and swung up behind her, his arms coming around her waist to help control the horse. They rode hard for the southern crossing, the cattle streaming ahead of them. Behind, Gaines's men were regrouping, but too slowly. The element of surprise had worked. The crossing was everything Elias had promised. Narrow, rocky, treacherous. The cattle balked at the entrance, and it took all of Clara's skill to force the lead steers into the water. "Come on," she shouted. "You've come this far. Don't quit on me now." Maybe the cattle understood. Maybe they just sensed her determination. Either way, they began to cross, one nervous step at a time. Clara and Elias waited until the last steer was in the water before following. Behind them, Gaines's men appeared on the ridge, but they were too late. Their herd was across, and there was no way to pursue without following the same dangerous crossing. They made it to the far bank just as the sun reached its zenith. Clara slid from Dancer's back and stood there, breathing hard, unable to believe they'd survived. "We did it," she said, and started laughing. "We actually did it!" Elias dismounted beside her, and Clara saw blood on his shirt. "You're hurt." "Just a graze. I've had worse." But Clara was already tearing a strip from her own shirt, her hand shaking as she tried to bind the wound. "You could have been killed." "So could you. That was insane, riding back for me." "You rode back for Billy. I rode back for you. Seems fair." Elias caught her hands, stilling them. "Clara, what Gaines said, about Silver City, about the warrant. My father told me the truth, about Judge Harrington, about what really happened. You struck a corrupt judge who was stealing from innocent people. That doesn't make you a criminal. It makes you a decent man. The law might see it differently. Then the law is wrong. You stood up for people who couldn't defend themselves. You lost everything doing the right thing. How could I hold that against you?" Elias's hands tightened on hers. "Because standing with me makes you a target. Gaines wasn't lying about that. When we get to Denver, there will be questions, investigations. Your association with me could destroy your reputation. I don't care. You should. You've worked too hard to let—" "I said I don't care." Clara pulled one hand free and placed it against his cheek. "Elias, for my entire life, I've done everything alone because I was afraid that needing someone made me weak. But you know what? I was wrong. Standing alone didn't make me strong. It just made me lonely. Clara, let me finish. You could have run a dozen times. When Pike threatened us, when Gaines came after the herd, when I pushed you away and told you I didn't need you, you could have ridden off and saved yourself. But you didn't. You stood with me. And now I'm standing with you. Consequences be damned." Elias's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. The second real smile she'd seen from him. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation. Also, a compliment." "Good, because I'm about to be even more stubborn." Clara took a deep breath. "When we get to Denver, we're not running. We're not hiding. We're going to sell these cattle, use the money to hire a good lawyer, and we're going to clear your name properly. Together. That could take months, maybe years. Then I guess you're stuck with me for a while." "I could think of worse fates." They stood there, hands joined, something unspoken but powerful passing between them. Clara felt the world shift, felt possibilities opening up that she'd never allowed herself to imagine. Not rescue, not protection, but partnership, equality, choice. Her father's voice broke the moment. "Clara, we've got a problem." She turned to see her father pointing back across the crossing. Gaines was there, alone, sitting his horse on the far bank. He wasn't shooting, wasn't threatening,
Just watching. Clara walked to the water's edge. "You lost, Gaines. We're through. The herd's safe." Gaines's voice carried across the water, calm and cold. "You think this is over? You think reaching Denver solves anything? I own half the stockyard managers in that city. I own the land office. I own the sheriff. You won't be able to sell a single steer without my permission. We'll see about that. Yes, we will. And when you fail, when you're broke and desperate and your men have abandoned you, I'll still be here. And I'll take what I want for pennies on the dollar." "You can't win, Clara. The system is designed to crush people like you." "Then I'll change the system." Gaines laughed. "Good luck with that." He turned and rode away, leaving Clara staring after him, her triumph curdling into fear. What if he was right? What if reaching Denver meant nothing? "He's bluffing," Elias said quietly. "He wants you scared." What if he's not? Then we fight there like we fought here. One battle at a time. Clara looked at her herd, her exhausted men, the long road still ahead. They'd won this round, but Gaines was right about one thing. The war was far from over. How do you stay so calm? Practice. Years of fighting battles I couldn't win taught me to focus on what I could control. Elias looked at her. And right now, I can control whether I stand with you or run away. That's an easy choice. Is it? I'm offering you nothing but more trouble. You're offering me something I haven't had in years. A reason to stop running. A purpose beyond survival. He paused. A partner. The word hit Clara like a physical touch. Partner. Not boss and employee, not man and woman fitting into society's prescribed roles, but equals, choosing each other deliberately. "We should keep moving," her father said, but his voice was gentler now. "Denver's still a day's ride. We need to reach it before word of this fight spreads." Clara nodded, but she didn't move. She was staring at the horizon, thinking about what waited there. Gaines's threats, the law's questions about Elias, the fight to sell the herd and save the ranch, the endless battle to prove she belonged in a world designed to exclude her. It should have been overwhelming, terrifying, but with Elias beside her, it just felt like the next chapter. "One day at a time," she said, echoing his earlier words. "One battle at a time." Exactly. They mounted up and rode after the herd, leaving the burned plateau and destroyed bridge behind. Clara didn't look back. Whatever came next, she'd face it the way she'd faced everything else. Head on, unflinching, and now, finally, not alone. The stockyards in Denver smelled of manure, sweat, and money, and Clara could tell within 5 minutes that Gaines hadn't been bluffing. "I'm sorry, Miss O'Rourke," the yard manager said, not looking sorry at all. "But we can't process your herd today, or tomorrow. We're completely booked for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks? That's impossible. I sent word ahead. You confirmed my slot." The manager shuffled papers on his desk, avoiding her eyes. "Must have been a clerical error. These things happen. These things happen when someone pays you to make them happen." Clara leaned across his desk. "How much did Gaines give you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The hell you don't. Tom Gaines owns you, doesn't he? Told you to block my sale, string me along until my cattle lose weight and value." The manager's face reddened. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Not until you give me my slot." "Security," the manager called, and 2 large men appeared in the doorway. Elias's hand settled on Clara's shoulder, gentle but firm. "Let's go. This isn't the fight." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to overturn the manager's desk and force him to see reason. But Elias was right. Getting thrown out wouldn't help. Outside, her father was waiting with the hands. "Well?"
Blocked, just like Gaines said. Clara paced, her mind racing. Every stockyard in Denver is probably the same. He's boxed us in. Then we sell elsewhere. Colorado Springs, Cheyenne. By the time we drive the herd that far, we'll have lost half the value. The cattle are already stressed, Father. Another week on the trail and we'll be selling at a loss. Clara stopped pacing. No, we fight here. There has to be someone in this city Gaines doesn't own. Like who? Her father asked. He's got the stockyards, probably the banks, definitely the sheriff. What about the newspapers? Elias interrupted. Men like Gaines hate exposure. They operate in shadows. Shine a light on what he's doing, and he loses power. Clara felt hope spark. The Denver Tribune. I met the editor once, years ago. Samuel Blackwood. He's no friend of corruption. Then let's pay him a visit. The Tribune offices were chaos. Reporters shouting, typewriters clacking, the smell of ink and tobacco hanging heavy in the air. Clara pushed through the crowd until she found Blackwood's office, a glass-walled room at the back. Samuel Blackwood was exactly as she remembered. Wild gray hair, ink-stained fingers, eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as Clara entered. Miss O'Rourke, heard you were in town. Also heard you're having trouble selling cattle. Word travels fast. That's my business. Sit. Tell me why you're here. Clara sat, Elias standing behind her chair like a silent sentinel. Tom Gaines is running a land fraud scheme. He's been forcing ranchers off their property using intimidation, violence, and corrupt officials. When they can't sell their cattle, they go broke. When they go broke, he swoops in and buys their land for nothing. Blackwood leaned back in his chair. That's a serious accusation. Can you prove it? I can prove he destroyed a bridge on public land to stop my cattle drive. I can prove he sent armed men to stampede my herd. I have witnesses. Witnesses who'll testify? In court? Against a man with Gaines's resources? Clara hesitated. Would her hands testify? Would they risk everything to stand against Gaines? I'll testify, Elias said quietly. I saw everything. Blackwood's eyes sharpened. And you are? Elias Crow, former territorial marshal. Former? Why former? Because I cared more about justice than politics. It cost me my badge. Blackwood studied Elias for a long moment. I know who you are. The Silver City incident. Judge Harrington. Clara's stomach clenched. Here it comes. The moment when their past destroyed their future. But Blackwood smiled. Harrington was a snake. You did the territory a favor punching him, even if it ended your career. Sit down, Marshal Crow. Let's talk. Relief flooded through Clara. You'll help us? I'll consider it, but I need more than eyewitness accounts of rustling. I need documentation, paper trails, evidence that connects Gaines to the broader fraud. Where would we even find that? The land office. If Gaines has been filing fraudulent claims, there'll be records. Deeds filed under false names, surveys that don't match reality, transfers that happen too quickly or too cheaply. The land office clerk is probably on Gaines's payroll too, Clara said. Probably. But records are records. They can't be erased completely. You just have to know where to look. Blackwood scribbled an address on a piece of paper. This is the home of Martin Fletcher. He was the chief land clerk until 3 months ago, when he was forced out. If anyone knows where Gaines buried his dirty secrets, it's Fletcher. Clara took the paper. Why was he forced out?
He refused to approve a claim he knew was fraudulent. Gaines had him removed. Fletcher's been trying to get someone to listen ever since. Why haven't you written about it? Because without proof, it's just allegations. Gaines would sue me into oblivion. But if Fletcher can point you to the proof, then we have a story. Clara stood, energy coursing through her. Where do we find him? Be careful, Blackwood warned. Gaines knows Fletcher's a threat. If he realizes you're working together. We will be. Careful, I mean. Clara extended her hand. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we bring Gaines down. Martin Fletcher lived in a modest house on the edge of town, the kind of place that spoke of better days now past. He answered the door with a shotgun in his hands. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. We're not selling anything, Clara said quickly. Samuel Blackwood sent us. We need information about Tom Gaines. Fletcher's expression changed. You're the O'Rourke girl. The one Gaines has been trying to destroy. That's me. Can we come in? Fletcher looked past her to Elias, then to Judge O'Rourke, who'd insisted on coming. You're the judge, the one from Thornfield County. I am. Your rulings cost Gaines 2 land acquisitions last year. He hates you almost as much as he hates me. Fletcher lowered the shotgun. Come in, but quickly. The inside of Fletcher's house was dim, curtains drawn against prying eyes. Papers covered every surface. Deeds, surveys, claims, maps. This is everything I managed to copy before they forced me out, Fletcher said. 3 years of fraudulent land transfers. Gaines didn't just steal from you, Miss O'Rourke. He's stolen from dozens of ranchers across 4 territories. Clara's breath caught. Dozens? At least 50 properties, maybe more. He'd identify land with water rights or mineral deposits, then systematically destroy the owners until they sold cheap. Sometimes he used legal pressure, fraudulent liens, contested surveys. Sometimes he used violence, whatever worked. And the land office let him? The land office helped him. Gaines pays well. Clerks would backdate documents, lose key files, approve claims they knew were false. By the time the victims realized what was happening, it was too late. The law said Gaines owned their land. Elias was studying the papers, his face grim. How did he hide this? There should have been investigations. There were, but Gaines owns judges, sheriffs, even some territorial officials. Anyone who looked too close either got paid off or driven out. Like me. Not judges, Clara's father said, his voice hard. Not all of us. If I'd known the scope of this, you couldn't have stopped it alone. Gaines has too much power. But together? Fletcher looked at each of them. Maybe we have a chance. What do you need from us? Clara asked. Time, protection, and access to the current land office records. I can prove the fraud, but I need to match my copies to the originals. Show that documents were altered after I left. How do we get into the land office? They're not going to just let us waltz in. Fletcher smiled grimly. You're Judge O'Rourke's daughter. You have a legal right to examine any documents related to your mother's estate, the O'Rourke Ranch. Clara's father straightened. He's right. I can file a formal request. They'll have to grant access. They'll also tell Gaines immediately, Elias pointed out. The moment you file, he'll know what we're doing. Then we move fast. File at closing time. Demand immediate access citing urgent legal deadlines. They won't have time to warn Gaines or hide evidence. It's risky, Fletcher said. Gaines has men watching the land office. If you're caught, we won't be caught. Clara felt certainty settle over her. We've come too far to stop now. Her father looked at her, and Clara saw pride mixing with fear in his eyes. Your mother would be proud of you, fighting for what's right, no matter the cost. Or she'd think I was crazy, but either way, we're doing this. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Judge O'Rourke would file the request at exactly 4 o'clock, 1 hour before the land office closed. Clara and Elias would be waiting outside to ensure no one left to warn Gaines. Fletcher would stay hidden, ready to compare documents once they gained access. It should have been simple, but nothing involving Tom Gaines was ever simple. At 3:30, as they were preparing to leave Fletcher's house, someone knocked on the door. Fletcher went pale. I'm not expecting anyone. Elias drew his pistol. Don't answer it. The knock came again, harder. Mr. Fletcher, it's Deputy Marshal Warren. I need to speak with you. A marshal? Clara's mind raced. Had they been discovered? Was this a trap? Stay quiet, Elias whispered. Maybe he'll leave. Fletcher, I know you're in there. I have information about Tom Gaines. Fletcher and Clara exchanged glances. Information or allure? Elias moved to the window, peeking through the curtains. He's alone. No one else visible. That doesn't mean it's safe, Fletcher said. But Clara was already moving toward the door. If he has information, we need it. Clara, wait! She opened the door. A young man in a marshal's uniform stood there, looking nervous. Miss O'Rourke, I was hoping to find you here. How did you know I was here? I've been watching Fletcher's house for 3 days, waiting for someone brave enough to listen to him. The marshal glanced over his shoulder. Can I come in? We shouldn't talk in the open. Clara stepped aside, and the marshal entered. Fletcher shut the door quickly. Who are you? Judge O'Rourke demanded. Deputy Marshal James Warren. I was assigned to investigate Tom Gaines 2 months ago. Territorial governor finally got enough complaints to take action. You're investigating Gaines? Clara felt hope surge. Then you can arrest him. Stop this whole scheme. I wish it were that simple. Gaines has layers of protection. Every time I get close to solid evidence, it disappears. Witnesses recant. Documents vanish. I can't build a case that will stick. Fletcher has evidence, Elias said. 3 years of fraudulent land transfers. Warren's eyes lit up. Original documents? Copies, but I can verify them against the originals in the land office. Then let's do it. Now. I'll escort you myself. Use my authority to demand access. Just like that? Clara was suspicious. Why would you help us? Because Tom Gaines represents everything wrong with how the West is being settled. Rich men stealing from honest people, using the law as a weapon instead of a shield. I became a marshal to stop men like him. Warren looked at each of them. And because my sister lost her ranch to Gaines. He drove her family into poverty, then bought their land for $100. She died last winter, froze to death in a tenement in St. Louis, because she couldn't afford heat. The pain in his voice was real. Clara recognized it. The anger that came from watching someone you love destroyed by an unjust system. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be sorry. Help me make him pay. They walked to the land office together. Clara, Elias, her father Fletcher, and Marshal Warren. Clara felt like she was walking toward a cliff edge, knowing the fall might kill her, but unable to turn back. The land office clerk looked up as they entered, and Clara saw fear flash across his face. We're closing soon. Not before I examine the O'Rourke estate records. Judge O'Rourke placed his formal request on the counter. This is a legal demand. You have to comply. I'll need to check with my supervisor. No need. Marshal Warren stepped forward, showing his badge. Federal investigation. You'll provide access to all records related to land transfers in Thornfield County for the past 5 years. Immediately. The clerk's face went white.
I don't have authorization. You have authorization from a Deputy United States Marshal. That's all you need. Now move." The clerk scrambled to comply, pulling files from locked cabinets. Fletcher began examining them, his hands shaking as he cross-referenced against his copies. "Here," Fletcher said after 10 minutes. "This deed transfer, dated March 15th. In my records, it's dated April 2nd. Someone backdated it to make it look like Gaines owned the land before the mineral survey." "And this one," her father said, holding up another document. "The survey shows a creek running through the property. But I've ridden that land. There's no creek. The survey's completely fabricated." They found more. Signatures that didn't match. Transfers recorded after the supposed sellers had died. Claims filed under the names of people who didn't exist. It was a systematic pattern of fraud, meticulously documented. "This is enough," Warren said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. "This is enough to bring charges. Federal charges. Gaines won't be able to buy his way out of this." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd found the proof. Then the door burst open, and Tom Gaines walked in with 10 armed men behind him. "Well, well," Gaines said, his voice pleasant as ever. "Breaking and entering, theft of official documents, interfering with a federal investigation. Oh, wait, there is no official investigation, is there, Deputy Warren?" Warren's hand moved toward his gun, but Gaines's men already had theirs drawn. "I wouldn't," Gaines advised. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. Best just surrender quietly." "You can't do this," Clara said, her voice shaking with fury. "We have evidence. Proof of your fraud." "Evidence? All I see is a disgraced former marshal, a desperate woman, and a bitter ex-employee stealing legal documents." Gaines smiled. "No court will admit anything you took from this office, and by tomorrow, these files will have been corrected. Any inconsistencies will disappear. We have witnesses. Warren is a federal marshal. Warren is a junior deputy with delusions of heroism. His investigation was closed last week, terminated due to lack of evidence." Gaines pulled out a telegram. "Official order from the territorial governor. Warren's been chasing ghosts, and now he's going to face charges for exceeding his authority." Warren's face went ashen. "That's not possible. The governor approved my investigation." "The governor approved what I told him to approve. And now he's ending what I told him to end." Gaines gestured to his men. "Arrest them. All of them." "On what charges?" Judge O'Rourke demanded. "Theft, trespassing, conspiracy to defraud. I'll think of more." Gaines looked directly at Clara. "I told you this would end badly. I gave you a chance to walk away. But you couldn't help yourself. Too wild, too stubborn, too stupid to know when you're beaten." Clara felt Elias tense beside her, knew he was calculating odds, looking for an opening. But there wasn't one. They were trapped. Then Fletcher laughed. Actually laughed. "Something funny?" Gaines asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "You are. You really think you've won? That arresting us solves your problem?" Fletcher pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "This is a signed affidavit detailing everything I know about your fraud, along with a complete list of documents in my possession. I gave copies to 3 different lawyers in 3 different cities this morning. If anything happens to me, if I'm arrested, if I disappear, if I die in a convenient accident, those lawyers will release everything to every newspaper west of the Mississippi." Gaines's smile faltered. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You're a gambling man, Tom. Want to bet your entire empire on whether I'm telling the truth?" The silence stretched. Clara could see Gaines thinking, calculating, weighing risks.
Even if you're telling the truth, Gaines said finally, those documents won't hold up in court. I'll claim they're forgeries. Maybe, but the damage will be done. Every land claim you filed will be investigated. Every transfer questioned. Your reputation will be destroyed. Banks will call in your loans. Partners will distance themselves. You might beat the charges eventually, but by then, you'll be ruined. Clara saw it then, the crack in Gaines's facade, the fear behind the arrogance. He'd built his empire on shadows and silence, and Fletcher was threatening to drag everything into the light. "What do you want?" Gaines asked, and Clara heard the defeat in his voice. "I want you to withdraw all claims on the O'Rourke ranch. I want you to clear the way for Miss O'Rourke to sell her cattle at fair market value. And I want you to leave this territory. Permanently." "That's insane. I have millions invested here. Then you should have thought about that before you built your fortune on fraud." Fletcher's voice went hard. "Those are the terms. Accept them, or I release everything tonight." Gaines looked around the room, seeing his options disappear. His men were loyal, but not loyal enough to go down with him. The clerk was terrified. Even his money couldn't save him now. "Fine," he said finally. "You win. I'll withdraw my claims. Clear the path for the cattle sale. But I'm not leaving Denver." "Yes, you are. Because if you stay, I'll keep digging. And eventually, I'll find something even your lawyers can't defend. You've hurt too many people, Tom. Someone will talk. Someone always talks." Gaines's jaw clenched, but he nodded. 1 week. I'll be gone in 1 week. 2 days, and we'll be watching to make sure you go. For a long moment, Clara thought Gaines would refuse, would call Fletcher's bluff. But then he turned and walked out, his men following. The door closed behind them, and silence fell. "Did that really just happen?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It happened." Fletcher sagged against the desk, looking 10 years older. "But don't celebrate yet. Gaines will try to find a way out of this. We need to move fast." "I'll get my editor," Warren said. "Get these documents photographed and published before Gaines can destroy them. Once they're public, he can't hide." "And I'll file emergency injunctions," Judge O'Rourke added. "Freeze Gaines's assets. Prevent him from altering any more records. We'll lock him down legally while Warren builds the criminal case." Clara looked at Elias, who'd been silent through the whole confrontation. "You all right?" "I'm realizing I just watched justice actually work for once. It's a strange feeling." "Good strange or bad strange?" "Good. Definitely good." He smiled at her. "You did it, Clara. You beat him." "We did it. All of us." But even as she said it, Clara knew it wasn't over. Men like Gaines didn't go quietly. They'd won this battle, but the war might just be starting. She was right to worry, because Tom Gaines tried to kill them that very night. Clara was walking back to her hotel with Elias when the first shot rang out. The bullet shattered a window 6 inches from her head, and Elias tackled her to the ground before the second shot could find its mark. "Stay down," he shouted, his body covering hers as more bullets tore through the air above them. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Where are they?" "Rooftop across the street. At least 2 shooters." Elias pulled his pistol. "Can you run?" "Yes." "On 3, make for that alley. Don't stop, don't look back. 1, 2, 3. They ran, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. Clara's lungs burned, her legs pumped, and she could hear Elias's breathing harsh beside her. They dove into the alley just as a bullet caught Elias's shoulder, spinning him around. "Elias!" Clara caught him as he stumbled, saw blood spreading across his shirt. "You're hit!" "Just a graze. Keep moving,"
But it wasn't just a graze. Clara could see the pain in his face, the way he was favoring his left side. They needed help, needed shelter, needed... A door opened ahead of them. Marshal Warren stood there, his gun drawn. "In here, quickly!" They stumbled through the door into what looked like a boarding house. Warren slammed it shut and threw the bolt. "How did you know?" Clara started. "I didn't. I was staying here, heard the shots, came to investigate." Warren looked at Elias's shoulder. "You need a doctor." "What I need is to know who's trying to kill us." "Gaines. Who else?" Clara was tearing strips from her petticoat, pressing them against Elias's wound. "He's not accepting defeat." "He gave his word," Warren said. "His word means nothing. It never did." Clara felt fury rising through her fear. "We humiliated him, took everything he'd built. He's not going to just walk away." A crash from upstairs made them all freeze. Then voices, rough and angry, searching room to room. "They're inside," Warren whispered. "Must have come in the back way." "How many exits?" Elias asked, his voice tight with pain. "Front door, back door, and a cellar that leads to the alley 2 buildings over." "The cellar. Now." They moved through the boarding house as quietly as possible, but the floorboards creaked, giving them away. Shouts echoed from above, followed by the thunder of boots on stairs. The cellar door was locked. Warren shot the lock off, and they plunged down into darkness. Clara felt her way forward, one hand on the stone wall, the other supporting Elias, who was weakening from blood loss. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Just a little farther." "Always giving orders," Elias said, and she could hear the smile in his voice despite everything. "Even now. Especially now. I didn't survive Gaines's men and burning plateaus and river crossings just to lose you to a bullet in a dark cellar." They found the tunnel exit and emerged into an alley 2 blocks from the boarding house. Clara could hear shouting behind them, the hunters realizing their prey had escaped. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said to Elias. "We need to end this, tonight, before Gaines kills someone else." "You can barely stand." "I can stand well enough to shoot, and right now, that's all that matters." Warren appeared beside them, breathing hard. "They'll keep coming. Gaines has at least 20 men in Denver. We can't run forever." "Then we don't run." Clara's voice came out hard, decided. "We go after Gaines ourselves. Finish this." "That's suicide," Warren said. "He'll be barricaded in his hotel, surrounded by guards." "Then we don't go to his hotel. We make him come to us." Clara looked at Elias. "The stockyards. That's where he thinks he's won, where he's got his managers and his influence. We go there. We challenge him publicly. We force him to either fight or run like the coward he is." Elias studied her face, and Clara saw understanding dawn. "You want to make him choose between his reputation and his safety." "Exactly. Men like Gaines care more about how they're seen than anything else. If we call him out in front of the whole city, he'll either have to face us or admit he's afraid. Either way, we win." "Or we die," Warren pointed out. "We're going to die anyway if we keep hiding. At least this way, we go down fighting." Clara looked at both men. "I'm doing this with or without you, but I'd rather do it with you." Elias smiled despite the pain. "You're absolutely insane." "Is that a yes?" "It's always been yes, from the moment I met you." They made their way to the stockyards, moving through back streets and alleys. Clara could feel the minutes ticking away, could imagine Gaines's men spreading through the city, hunting them. When they reached the stockyards, she didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the main office and kicked open the door. The yard manager jumped, his eyes going wide with fear. "Miss O'Rourke, What are you? Get me every stockyard owner in Denver, every livestock buyer, every rancher with cattle to sell. I want them here in 1 hour. I can't possibly. Clara drew her pistol and fired a shot into the ceiling. 1 hour. Tell them Clara O'Rourke is making a public statement about Tom Gaines. Tell them if they care about their businesses, their reputations, or the future of honest trade in this territory, they'll be here. And tell them to bring witnesses. The manager scrambled to comply, and within 40 minutes, the stockyard office was packed. Ranchers, buyers, merchants, even some city officials, drawn by the promise of scandal. Clara stood at the front of the room, Elias beside her, despite his wound, Warren lending his authority as a federal marshal. "Thank you for coming," Clara said, her voice carrying to every corner. "I know you're wondering why I called this meeting. The answer is simple. Tom Gaines has been running a criminal enterprise in this territory for years. He's defrauded landowners, bribed officials, and used violence to steal property. And tonight, he tried to have me killed to cover it up." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara pressed on. "I have evidence, documents proving systematic fraud, testimony from witnesses. But more than that, I have the truth. And the truth is that if we let men like Gaines operate in the shadows, we're all complicit in the corruption that's poisoning the West." "These are serious accusations," one of the city officials said. "Do you have proof?" Fletcher stepped forward, holding up the copied documents. "I have proof. 3 years of fraudulent land transfers, backdated deeds, fabricated surveys, all done with Tom Gaines's knowledge and approval." "And I have an official federal investigation," Warren added. "One that Gaines tried to shut down through political pressure. But the evidence exists, and it will be released regardless of what happens tonight." "So why tell us?" a rancher asked. "Why not just go to the law?" "Because Gaines owns enough of the law to make it useless," Clara said bluntly. "But he doesn't own all of you. And he can't survive if every honest person in this territory knows what he is. I'm calling him out. Publicly. Here. Now. Let him defend himself if he can." As if summoned by her words, the door burst open. Tom Gaines strode in, flanked by Pike and a dozen armed men. But this time, Gaines looked different. His careful composure was cracking, his eyes wild with fury. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Gaines snarled at Clara. "I offered you peace. I offered you a way out, but you had to keep pushing. Peace? You tried to kill me 2 hours ago." "That was just business. Eliminating a problem before it got worse. Nothing personal." The crowd gasped. Several men reached for weapons, but Gaines's guards already had theirs drawn. "Are you confessing to attempted murder?" Warren asked, his hand on his own pistol. "In front of all these witnesses?" Gaines laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "Witnesses? These people won't say a word. They're too afraid. They know what happens to people who cross me." "Not anymore." The voice came from the back of the room. Judge O'Rourke pushed through the crowd, carrying a sheaf of legal documents. "As of 1 hour ago, every fraudulent land claim you filed has been frozen by emergency court order. Your bank accounts are seized pending investigation, and the territorial governor has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy." Gaines's face went white, then red. "That's impossible. The governor is finally listening to the evidence we provided. Seems when you threatened a federal marshal and a sitting judge's daughter, you finally went too far." Judge O'Rourke's voice was cold. "It's over, Gaines. You're finished." For a moment, Clara thought Gaines would surrender. Then she saw his hand move toward his coat, saw the glint of metal, and knew he was going to shoot her father. She moved without thinking. Her pistol was in her hand, the shot ringing out before Gaines could clear leather. The bullet took him in the arm, and he dropped his weapon with a scream.
Pike and the other guards raised their guns, but suddenly they were facing a room full of armed ranchers, all with weapons drawn and aimed at Gaines's men. "Drop them," one of the ranchers said. "We've had enough of you boys terrorizing decent people." Pike looked at his men, at the crowd, at Gaines bleeding and beaten. Then he dropped his gun. One by one, the others followed. Warren moved forward, iron shackles in his hands. "Thomas Gaines, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, and about 30 other charges I'll think of on the way to jail." As Warren cuffed Gaines, Clara felt her legs go weak. Elias caught her, his good arm wrapping around her waist. "It's over," he said softly. "You did it. We did it." Clara looked up at him, saw the pride and pain and something deeper in his eyes. "Together." The crowd erupted in cheers, ranchers slapping each other on the back, city officials already talking about reform and justice. But Clara barely heard them. She was looking at Elias, at this quiet, damaged man who'd stood by her when everyone else said she was too wild, too stubborn, too much. "Your shoulder needs treatment," she said. "It can wait." "Elias, Clara, I need to say something, before I lose my nerve or bleed out, or both." He took a breath. "I came to your ranch looking for a place to hide, a temporary stop before moving on. I never expected to find someone worth staying for, someone who'd fight beside me instead of asking me to fight for her. Someone who saw past the badge I'd lost and the mistakes I'd made and just saw me." Clara's throat tightened. "Elias, let me finish. I know I'm not much of a prize. I'm wanted in 3 territories, broke, and currently bleeding all over your dress. But if you'll have me, if you'll take a chance on a man who's finally found something worth fighting for, I'd like to stay. Not as your hired hand, not as temporary help, but as your partner, in every way that matters." Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking if you'll marry me, if you'll let me spend the rest of my life standing beside you, arguing with you, and probably getting shot at alongside you because that seems to be how you operate." Laughter bubbled up through Clara's tears. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "Is that a no?" "It's a yes, you idiot. Of course it's yes." Elias kissed her then, in front of the whole crowd, and Clara kissed him back. She heard cheers, heard her father's surprised laugh, heard Fletcher muttering something about romance being wasted on the young. But mostly she felt Elias's arms around her, felt the rightness of choosing someone who'd chosen her back. When they finally broke apart, her father was standing there with tears in his own eyes. "I was wrong about you," he said to Elias, "about what my daughter needed. I thought she needed protection, guidance, someone to take care of her. But what she needed was someone to stand beside her, someone who respected her strength instead of fearing it." "She didn't need me at all," Elias said, "but I'm grateful she chose me anyway." Judge O'Rourke turned to Clara. "Your mother would have loved him, would have loved seeing you like this, strong, uncompromising, free. I wish she could have met him. She'd have shot him the first time he argued with you, then invited him to dinner. You're exactly like her." Her father smiled. "That's the highest compliment I know how to give." The next 2 days were chaos. Gaines was formally charged and jailed, his empire dismantled piece by piece. Clara sold her cattle at full market value, the stockyard manager suddenly eager to accommodate her now that Gaines's shadow was gone. The money was enough to save the ranch, hire proper hands, and invest in improvements Clara had been dreaming about for years. Fletcher was reinstated at the land office with a promotion and a mandate to root out corruption. Warren's investigation was officially reopened and expanded, and Clara's story spread across the territory. The wild woman who'd taken down one of the most powerful land barons in the West. But the moment Clara treasured most came 3 days after Gaines's arrest. She and Elias were standing on the ridge overlooking her ranch, the land stretching out in all directions like a promise. "Are you sure about this?" Elias asked. "Marrying me means you'll be tied to my past, to the accusations, the questions, the whispers." "Let them whisper. I've been too wild, too stubborn, too much my entire life. One more thing for people to talk about won't kill me." "I'm serious, Clara. This won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is. You taught me that." She took his hand. "Besides, I like a challenge. Keeps life interesting." Elias smiled. "Well, you'll certainly never be bored." They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Her father officiated, tears streaming down his face as he pronounced them husband and wife. Fletcher and Warren stood as witnesses. Clara's ranch hands cheered so loudly the cattle in the far pasture spooked. Clara wore her mother's dress, altered to fit. Elias wore new clothes, purchased with his first month's wages as the ranch's co-owner, a partnership Clara insisted on, despite his protests. "Partners share everything," she'd told him. "The land, the work, the decisions. If you're going to be my husband, you're going to be my equal. No other way will work." "Yes, ma'am," he'd said, and the way he smiled told her he understood exactly what she was offering. Not rescue, not protection, but true partnership, built on mutual respect and chosen freely by two people who'd fought too hard to settle for anything less. Their wedding night, Clara stood at the window of the ranch house that was now truly hers, legally, emotionally, completely. Elias came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about all those men who said I was too wild for any man, too difficult, too much trouble. And they were right. I am wild. I am difficult. I am trouble." Clara turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. "But I'm not too much. Not for the right person. Not for someone who sees my wildness as strength, my stubbornness as determination, my refusal to be tamed as the very thing that makes me worth knowing. I love you exactly as you are, Clara Crow. Wild, stubborn, impossible, and mine." "Yours. And you're mine," she kissed him. "We're going to scandalize this whole territory, you know. A woman running a ranch alongside her husband instead of behind him, making decisions together, arguing in public. I'm counting on it." "Good, because I have plans, big plans. We're going to make this ranch the best in 3 territories. We're going to prove that partnership between equals is stronger than any hierarchy. And we're going to show every woman who's been told she's too much that being too much for small minds just means you're exactly enough for the right ones." Elias laughed, the sound free and joyful. "Ambitious as ever. You expected different?" "Not for a second." They stood together in the window, looking out of the land they'd fought for, the future they'd chosen, the partnership they'd built from ashes and determination, and the refusal to accept that the world's limitations had to be their own. Clara had been called wild her whole life, and she'd finally found someone who understood that her wildness wasn't a flaw to be corrected, but a fire to be honored, and that standing in that fire together meant they'd both burn brighter than they ever could alone.